Hey,
Hey, assalamu alaikum.
what's up? السلام عليكم.
How's it going, man?
كيف حالك؟
بخير تمام كله تمام وانت؟
الحمد لله. الحمد لله. That's it. Up to
That's
there.
it.
Right now, I'm in my humble abode, which is in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. I came here in October 2017, and we opened the first parkour academy in KSA. And it's been a wild journey, but it's been a great one nonetheless. Um, we also offer movement and gymnastics classes in our academy. Um,
Is it tailored to only children or do you cater also to adults?
no, yes. So we offer classes from 3 years old onwards, so all the way to adults, and there's no limitation on the adult end. Um, we have classes for parkour, gymnastics, movement. We're open 6 days a week, so full-time job here as a coach. I was certified in the UK parkour, and I also got my level 1 and level 2 gymnastics qualification in the UK. I've been a practitioner of parkour for 12 years now,
12 years.
and I've been coaching for just under 5 now. So previously I was coaching in the UK as well.
Yeah, when you said
Yeah.
you got a certificate, you have a certificate from some parkour affiliation.
Parkour Generation, yeah, the leading body in Europe, the Adapt course. Yeah.
And the gym in Jeddah, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was built with the
Yeah.
blessing of Stefan Brigou.
Yes, so we are working in partnership with Parkour DXB. So they initially built their headquarters in Dubai, and then our owner, now Hala and Mariam, they reached out. They wanted to open a parkour gym, and they reached out to Stefan and Chris, who are the co-founders of Parkour DXB, located in Dubai. And they basically said that they voiced their interest in parkour and how they wanted to bring it to Saudi Arabia and have the first parkour academy here. And yeah, it happened. If for the viewers, if they don't know, Stefan Vigru is one of the founders of parkour, one of the starting founders of parkour, and he's been living and breathing parkour for as long as I remember. And his passion is unparalleled. So it's always very
What
pleasant.
respect in terms of practice or in terms of spreading the word of parkour?
I think spreading the love of parkour. He really. It, I know this is sometimes used, overused, that someone is so genuine about a passion, but I truly believe that this guy is like his mind is on just spreading parkour. He doesn't really. I mean, everyone obviously, when they're opening a business, they have to endure as a business and kind of thrive. But I feel that his primary objective is to spread parkour, and then the rest is a bonus for him. I think it's an innate thing. I think it's like a very animalistic kind of primal feeling. And I think, when people ask me, when did you start parkour? I just answer, I never stopped, because I think that we all did parkour at some stage in our lives. And then, life got in the way, or we just pursued a different path. And then it was no longer as attractive to us, or, society indoctrinated us in whatever ways to not pursue it. And then maybe you felt that you were being judged for monkeying around, which I think is a shame. But sometimes you need to kind of push people to show them how easily that monkey within can come out. But yeah, I think you're completely right, because it's not, even though the sport itself is relatively new as a label, I also think it's, the most primitive sport, parkour. Maybe some of the new techniques and the moves are new, but as a movement, it's one of the oldest sports. You don't need a football pitch, you don't need a board, you don't need this or that. It's just your body.
Environment with your body.
100%. So I think it's people have this longing. They almost like pine for it. And when they come to parkour, and I'm sounding completely biased right now, but when they do come, it's like they're like, yeah, this is what I want to do. This is what I've been missing from maybe my childhood. So it's a very nostalgic thing, I think, for me. Anyway, that's how I feel. I kind of see it.
That's how I feel as well. When I see, but I think it's a group of activities. I honestly think it's a group of activities like parkour, rock climbing, fighting. I have mixed feelings about dancing. Though I do feel dancing is one of the oldest human activities. I do think, moving to percussion. Though I would say
I agree on that, because I think dancing, there's a fine line when it's starting to fuse with modern age music, which is kind of taking away that primitive state of it. And I think you're right in that. Like if you're talking about percussions, which is so so in the past and so old, then because that's a very kind of base kind of default template that it grew off. And now it's kind of branching off to many.
When would you dance to rhythm? There was no concept of what rhythm was before there was some sort of recurring percussive sound that gives you that sense of rhythm. So in that sense, if we took this to its logical conclusion, you could argue, yes, I think parkour comes way before. Parkour and fighting probably came.
Yeah, before. I think so.
Fuck you, dancers. No, okay.
We love you guys.
We're first. Is there potential for parkour? Is there sincere interest? Do you see the scene growing in Jeddah or in Saudi in general? What are your thoughts?
So there's been a great amount of momentum in movement, and just people wanting to just get out there and move. I'm not just talking about disciplines like fighting and boxing and parkour. I'm talking about just anything.
So the movement as a subject has become.
Yes, exactly. So I think with everything changing here and the new prince kind of pushing this drive for a change, and as you know, women driving recently. I mean, there's been a lot is changing, and for the good. It still is going to take a lot of time, and they have to be quite sensible with this change and not kind of rush to aggravate anyone, because there's still obviously quite a lot of conservatives here and there, which also we've had to kind of be quite careful with. But if slowly but surely there is definitely an interest, and I think anywhere entertainment and sports is so big. And as a country that's been suppressed and for so long, there's just been this like yearning for this. And I think everyone's just going crazy now that there's this availability and there's a market for it.
And you guys are making it available to people, which is amazing. I always had the feeling that, if you could target the youth, you could redirect the future of a nation. And I noticed when I went to Thailand and I studied under Olavo, I studied jiu-jitsu under Olavo, I soon found out that Olavo was one of the pivotal figures in changing the education system in the UAE, in Abu Dhabi, where they actually made jiu-jitsu part of the school curriculum.
Wow.
And the prince was really intrigued by the whole martial art. That guy just dove deep into it, and he saw the value of it. And slowly steps were taken, and over the course of a few years, it has become part of the school curriculum. And I'm just, I'm thinking out loud here, but I was thinking, if I were to send my kid to school and choose a physical activity, it would probably be something like parkour, fighting, dancing.
It's interesting you say that, because we offer parkour as an afternoon activity to over 6 schools now, if I'm not. 6 schools, and it's interesting to see how they've picked up. We offered the first term in October 2017, and people were just like, what's this parkour? They didn't even know. We were giving presentations, but they were still like, I don't really know what this is. I'll just put my kid in football or soccer for you Americans. And over time, like it's been crazy how, I don't know if it's just been from us or just people kind of maybe trying to educate themselves and looking out and having more of an open mind about sports. Come the third or the next year, we had so many more signups now for parkour, and it does wonders for kids. It instills so much confidence in an individual. It builds their balance, their coordination, focus, strength, just to name a few. And most importantly, it allows them to express themselves freely without any boundaries. Which I think is the most important thing, because it's not regimented like gymnastics, for example, where
it would be the obstacle you're trying to overcome, which is it gives you kind of like there's a metaphor to that, there's analogies to that.
Exactly.
It is what it is. It's like you are trying to figure out
that's it. I mean, parkour is
overcoming an obstacle.
Exactly, and like in parkour, you find that as much as you're overcoming it physically, you have to overcome it mentally, which I think that really builds an individual. And especially if you start from such a young age, man, like you see these kids and they're like, there's so much more. I think that they're going to grow up to be so much more confident than some of their peers who aren't given this opportunity.
Yeah, because you're straight up confronting fears.
All the time.
Like, especially with height training, this is something. In my last 2 interviews, I interviewed people that are studying with Marcello Balozzo, if you've heard of him before, and he's a parkour guy based in Padova, Italy, and he gives them a lot of height training stuff.
Okay. Like walking on ledges.
You just
and
stand.
stuff?
Just stand.
Okay.
Just sit if you can't stand. But it's just getting familiar with the feeling of fear when confronted with heights. It's height training. And there's really no way you could argue with that kind of fear. I think everybody is confronted with that feeling.
Oh yeah.
When standing on a ledge or on a.
Unless you're like Alex Honnold or something, who like free solos.
But
El Capitan.
Even him, I'm sure he's scouted the route. He knows the choreography by heart, and he probably constantly has to fight with that feeling to not let it overwhelm him. Because as soon as you get overwhelmed, you're dead.
Yeah. Although I think they did a MRI scan on him. I don't mean to deviate but I think they did an MRI scan or CT scan or something on his brain, and they found that he's missing like a big chunk of his amygdala, which I think is like it's connected to your fear receptors, and they were flashing pictures on him, and so it'd be like a birthday cake, balloon, toy, and then snake, where any normal human being would kind of jolt to that, and he was just like steady. So it's interesting to see like how some people differ in how they perceive fear.
You make a really good point there, because sometimes it's not just about mindset. Sometimes it's not just about training. Sometimes it's about genetics and the physiology that the universe has gifted you with, because it is a gift to be alive, regardless of what your structure is. But it is,
just about.
It's crazy to think about that. But then again, you can't use that as an excuse to be like, oh yeah, well I don't have that part of my brain missing, so
exactly.
overwhelm me, and I'll just
exactly. And I think that like we need a bit of fear, otherwise we'll kill ourselves. So fear is a way of warning you of the ramifications. Now, some people are able to tap into that and kind of harness and channel that fear better than others. And I think that's what differentiates someone. But that you don't, I think you're right, that you don't feel fear at all. I think that's impossible. It's not humanly possible. How I started parkour. I'd always say that I was quite an athletic kid. I have a black belt in Shotogan karate, and I was doing that kind of through my childhood until I was like 15. And then I don't know if maybe the belting system has a bit of a kind of that effect, especially when you're a kid. You kind of feel that you get the black belt and you've almost like reached the Everest of karate, which is completely the wrong idea, especially like in the school I was, that kind of give out belts quite easily. And I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I know that different martial arts, it's a lot harder to gain a belt than other ones. I think.
Yeah, it depends on the martial art.
Exactly, but I think that
depends on how much value they put on sparring. Because if you can't, in some schools, if you can't pull off what you learned in a sparring session, you could only do katas. Then
yeah.
I mean, but it depends. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah. Anyway, I just feel that maybe that kind of had an effect, and seeing that I got the black belt, I didn't really put enough precedence and see its salience of like now is where it really starts. And I kind of thought, I got the black belt now. What's next? I was kind of hungry for another sport. And then I remember it was kind of like the era of YouTube started to kind of grow, and people would just kind of binge watch random videos. And I remember coming across watching some parkour, and again, one of the founders of parkour, and I just watched it, and I remember like rewatch, like it'd finish and I just rewatch it and just rewatch it and rewatch it, and I'd go on like a proper tangent of all his videos that were on at the time. And I remember just thinking to myself, I need to do that. Like, that's what I need to do. And I remember having this feeling of like, fuck, I need to do that. And I remember watching some of these videos with my close mate, who's like, funny enough, we started together on the same day, and he's in Jeddah here with me, also a coach. And yeah, we've kind of been training ever since. And we watched it together, and I kind of said to him jokingly now, like, should we go and do that? Like, we weren't going to take it seriously. It was more kind of like, let's go make fun of it. And we had obviously no moves in our arsenal. We had no idea what the fuck we were doing. And we went to just some like shit tacky building site, and then just started jumping around. Absolutely no idea. Terrible form, big impact. Like, because that's how it was when you first started parkour. It was all about just big, who could do the biggest and highest jumps, like the old school parkour. Terrible form, couldn't even roll. And then we still enjoyed it. And I remember the next day, I can't remember who it was from the two of us, but I remember we called each other up and we were like, man, that was pretty fun, wasn't it? And it was like, yeah. Do you want to? Yes. Let's do it.
Nice.
And then we started to kind of look at some tutorials. We're completely self-taught. Being from Cyprus.
Were there tutorials online for?
Not really, but we were kind of like rewinding moves, or like they weren't. Yeah, we were just studying film. You're right, there weren't tutorials, and the few that they were very mediocre, and they would kind of plateau after a certain point. Like, they were very basic ones, and then after a while,
The only
there weren't any new ones.
tutorials, at least what I remember, is Jujimofu.
Yeah.
Tutorial.
And Hadjisoteriou is still a beast. Yes. Fucking hell. So, yeah, we basically self-taught, and there were no gyms or any access to parkour in Cyprus. So we were pretty much the pioneers there. And we would kind of go around to different spots, kind of get pissed off because we wouldn't see anything in some spots. We'd be like, this place is shit. Later do we know, after you kind of grow that parkour vision, that you can do parkour literally anywhere. And so, like, now I go back to some spots where we first went and we're like, what? Missed that. We missed that. And then, yeah, ever since then, we've been training parkour. But there's been shifts with me as well. And the reason for this is, inevitably, with this extreme sport, especially when you're trying to push the envelope and you want to progress a lot as an athlete, you will get injured. I don't know anyone who does parkour and hasn't been severely injured at some point if they're not trying to, like, push the envelope. I broke my foot in 2014, 2015, one of those. And I was doing a double backflip off a bridge onto sand. The first time I did it was fine, and then I wanted to catch it on film, foolishly. And then basically, because I had landed on sand, I had a bit of sand on my shoe. Again, I didn't rub the sand off, and on take off, I slipped. The dog kind of held the tuck, and I underflipped it, landed on my ankle unevenly on the sand, and dislocated my first, third, and fifth metatarsal and fractured, which was a pretty bad injury. And it took me quite a long time to rehab and recover.
Both mentally and physically, I assume.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the mental one was probably harder because if you, like, with parkour, you can always be active. You can, I had a broken foot, but I was kind of honing my handstands. But mentally, I was really distraught because I still wanted to, you still want more. You're craving for more, and you start questioning, will I ever be as good as I was? Have I fucked it all up? You don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, and that's happened to me quite a few times. And that perseverance
become easier.
I think, yeah, and I don't know if that's...
fucking hole.
I don't know. Again, it depends on the severity of the injury, and it also depends on how I got injured a lot of the times. When I feel that the injury was just like, if I get injured going and playing futsal, I won't forgive myself. Or if I do something that's like not my primary sport. If I get injured doing a double backflip off a bridge, yeah, I'll be pissed off at myself, but at least I kind of damaged myself doing what I love.
It's interesting. I was expecting a completely different answer.
Yeah,
I was expecting the answer of if I tried something and I got injured because it was a genuine accident, I'd be able to forgive myself. But if I was doing it, I don't know, to impress someone or to, get it on film, because you're the one that said the when you broke your foot.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. That one.
Do you think if
that
there
was
no camera, you would have
probably wouldn't have done it again, because it was a high level move, and I did it once. There wasn't a need to do it again, but I just felt like confident that I could do it again. And this is in many ways the problem with cameras, the problem with social medias, the problem with the Instagram and the likes and all that fucking ego boosting shit, that in many ways, it can be very detrimental because you push yourself out of your comfort zone, but in the same way, it can also improve you so much quicker as an athlete, because you have to kind of keep up with the game.
Yeah, and level up. You need to. You're posting something today, and then tomorrow you can post something that's not at least as cool as what you did.
Exactly.
I think Instagram and all these social media platforms, they have a very strange impact on people, because you could use it, you could really use it if to your advantage. You could use it in a way that works for you. Say, for example, you could use it to connect with other people. You could use it to push yourself so that next time you put a better trick and a better trick, or a better, it doesn't necessarily have to be a better trick, it could be better content. And
exactly.
That's a broader way of putting it, whereas a better trick is quite specific. And the other thing with social media is that I feel, at least till recently, I've been consuming a lot more than producing more. And
that is very true.
I think that is one of the things that fucks me up the most, because it's by consuming a lot of social media, you end up starting comparing yourself to others.
Yeah.
And then the reason behind you're posting stuff online becomes not to compare yourself to who you were yesterday, but to compare yourself to who somebody else is today. And
it's a never-ending cycle. It's just a rat race with no ending. Because there'll always be that next level, and that younger person, or in our case there'll be the youth kind of taking over, and it's inevitable. And that will happen. It will happen at some point.
So the question becomes, how do you deal with that? Like, how do you deal with maintaining a practice that involves you pushing yourself, but at the same time knowing that regardless of how much you push yourself in this field, there's always going to be somebody better than you, and even if you're the best, that won't last.
Yeah, exactly. I think there isn't a significant blueprint, but I think that as long as you're kind of, the way I try to see it, and obviously I that can sometimes fizzle out, is I like to see it as like my own personal portfolio, which I can look back on and kind of see that, that year I was into more of a flipping side, or that year I traveled there and I did that cool GoPro video or whatever. And as obviously it's so difficult when your newsfeed is filled with all these incredible athletes, and all you can try and say is like, you know what, I'm just not as good as them. And that can work on you, and you'll just never be kind of satisfied, which is a terrible thing, because in many ways they're obviously posting their best things, and you don't know the stuff that they're faltering in. And with Instagram, it's all very sugar coated, and we don't really get the full kind of idea of each athlete, and maybe the difficulties they're going through, or the hours of training that they had to do to pursue it. You're always seeing the final product, and I think that's interesting, because they're sometimes they don't appreciate, or we don't appreciate, how much work has been put in for even just one thing that might not be seen as that difficult, but if you saw the hours and the training, then you would appreciate it. And maybe like they just went through an injury, you don't see the hours of rehabilitation that went through to overcome that injury, and actually they came out a stronger individual. So yeah, all these, there's just too many factors, man.
We're just riding waves.
Yeah.
We're just riding waves of conversation. That's how I see it.
Yeah.
Sometimes conversations fizzle out. Sometimes conversations take an exponential growth towards ascendance.
I like it. Yeah, I mean, you hear from so many people who were like kind of in denial that they wouldn't join it, and they were like, "Nah, I don't want to." And everyone's kind of, from what I know, like fallen prey to it, because it's just like you're either in there or you're not, and you don't want to not be a part of something that everyone's kind of following religiously,
It's not
literally.
it's a way. It's a way to earn a living. It's part of marketing. It's part of it's part of
Yeah,
building a business. It's a part of it's your
exactly.
portfolio. It's your CV. It's your
Yeah.
you know,
And as a coach and a practitioner, like it's pretty much, it's part of my job. If I don't do it, if I neglect it, I'm basically neglecting my job,
the
you know?
responsibilities. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, good.
So I studied in the UK. I studied business management, and I wasn't kind of. I always thought I'd always just kind of have parkour as a hobby and as a kind of side job maybe, but never like work full time. Until I had this job offer in Saudi Arabia. So before that, I was kind of doing personal coaching here and there, but my main pursuit was getting better as an athlete, never the coaching aspect. But then I got this job offer, and I thought it was just one that I couldn't refuse, just because of its the pure prestige of it, and its novelty of being the first parkour academy. And I wanted to be a part of that. I wanted to be a part of that movement and that change. And obviously, being in Saudi, there's a lot of wealthy and affluent people here. I think in many ways, depending on the business and where you're located geographically, you can make a living in just about anything if people are willing to pay the money for it, and they see a reason to spend that money, or they have that money. Now, that being said, in other places in the world, I know a lot of friends of mine who I've trained parkour with them, and some that are even much better than I am, and probably ever will be, but they are struggling a lot more in making that money, just because of where they are located. So yeah, I think there's definitely a market, and I think as the sport's growing, there's going to be a need for more and more, and a greater demand for more and more coaches. But that can also have a ripple effect on, it not being so elusive, and then maybe the base salary of a coach might drop, because there'll be so many people who want to pursue that as a living, and
content as well might be diluted.
Exactly, 100%. So
parkour fitness class, a parkour class, the music with flashing lights and
yay. Which you see that, like any sport, it branches off, and this is when we were kind of saying about the dancing as well. There's like the raw kind of percussion dancing, but then it kind of branches off and it goes to some things that maybe you wouldn't like
as dancing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that being said, I don't know what the future of parkour holds, but it was interesting you were saying, and you're quite right, that it is kind of seen as quite a rebellious sport, kind of like skating. They kind of go in that hand in hand, which in a way is a shame, because then it's kind of given us a bad image, because they kind of label us as this, these vandalists or arsonists who just kind of go around jumping on walls and breaking shit. And if anything, we actually value the walls more than a passerby, because we want it to be there tomorrow to train on it.
But I can totally see why comparison is being made between skaters and dresseurs. Skaters redefine the function of predefined items in your environment. They, for example, a bench, its function is so that people could sit in the park. A skater does not ascribe to that set of thinking. They see it as, this is an object that I could use to do X move or X trick. And that trick, because you're using a board that's made of wood and steel and rubber, If you're going to do a trick with that, running towards it and skating towards it, jumping and grinding on the bench, you're eventually going to ruin it.
Yeah.
So I completely understand the commonality between parkour and skating. It's like using things that the government has assigned a specific function, or your society has assigned a specific function to it, and you're using it. You're misbehaving the city. You're using it in a different way than what it was intended to.
In a different light.
But the difference between parkour and skating is skating that usually destroy property.
Yeah, I mean,
there is some code of ethics behind how you leave a space after you've used it.
Yeah, 100%. But like anywhere though, you're gonna have the kind of respectful tracers, and then you're gonna have a lot that don't respect that it's a private property. They get asked to leave very kindly by a lot of security guards, and they pick up a fight, or they'll be very disrespectful. And I find that it's sometimes these guys that give parkour quite a bad name, and it makes us kind of come out as like these reckless kids on the block, when it's really not like that. There's many different aspects, and parkour is a discipline at the end of the day. And if you don't respect parkour, it won't respect you back. And you can see it in those athletes who are quite humble, and they see parkour in a different light to those who are just really kind of arrogant, and they just want to. There's a lot of different sides to the coin.
There's probably as many sides to the coins as there are participants in that activity. Like every person has their own personality, and they bring that to the table.
Exactly. But to go back, because we were initially talking about kind of the romantic side, and how the love for parkour came, and then you kind of go through those waves of in and out and frustration, and like I said, I had that really bad injury where I broke my foot, and then I had to kind of rehabilitate that and take a lot of time off to take that time to almost appreciate how much. It's only when things are taken away from you, you really realize, like, shit, that was amazing. I don't want to lose that again. Mm-hmm. So do you ever push yourself as much when you come back from an injury? And I think that's very subjective and very individual based, because at first I was thinking, I'm never gonna push myself like that again. I just want to be safe and just be able to train for as long as I can. And I really kind of cared about the longevity, and I didn't want to hustle that anymore, because every time you got to do something new or something big, you're basically taking a risk. You're hustling. There's so many uncertainties, especially with any extreme sport. I think you never know when there's just some variable that can just throw you off. And in this kind of rehab, I kind of took up climbing quite a lot. I was doing a lot of bouldering to rehabilitate, because I couldn't take high impact yet. So I was doing a lot of bouldering, and I really kind of started falling in love with bouldering. I wasn't as bothered. So it's interesting how you can, I didn't per se quit parkour at that point. It was still very much on my mind. I had the parkour vision when I was walking the streets. I was like, oh, that's a sick climb, or I'd love to do that one day. But I had shifted to another sport temporarily so that I could deal with my frustration, mentally and physically. There was like this need, an outburst, which I felt parkour at the time, doing such simple moves, which previously if I did those moves, I wouldn't be pleased with, I wouldn't be satisfied with. So I had to almost do something new where it was challenging.
But you did not choose,
although
you didn't choose tennis, for example. You didn't choose badminton or volleyball.
No.
You chose climbing. And that is, to some extent, I would say it's sort of like in the same, well, you could even say it's part of parkour, climbing structures, but you could also say it's part of the group of activities that I described earlier as, I guess, the primitive minimalistic as well activities. You don't require any gadgets or any tools to do them, other than your body.
Yeah, 100%. And that's why part of me also enjoys bouldering more than free climbing or climbing with ropes and gear and harnesses, because I just don't like this feeling of having gear on me or any equipment. I like to just be as free as possible. Because when I do climbing with parkour, I haven't got a harness, I haven't got a rope, and I've done deadly climbs. I've climbed cranes and stuff where I don't have a rope and stuff. So going I feel like I'm almost going backwards if I were to go climbing, even if the climbs themselves were to be fucking insane. I feel that for me, it's a lot of the times it's the mental thing that I want to challenge myself, not so much the physical.
It's also it makes more sense in terms of, if your main practice is parkour, it would make more sense to train in such a way that would complement that practice.
Exactly.
Otherwise,
which would be beneficial.
Yeah, and I like the idea as well of not being dependent on gear, because it is a dependency. You know that if you fall, the rope's going to catch you. Whereas with bouldering, you climb as high as you're willing to fall, and you need to take that risk into consideration, as opposed with climbing with ropes. I mean, you kind of take it into consideration, but it's
a whole different ball game. I mean, knowing that, after a certain height, and the only way is up, because sometimes, or most of the time, going down is a no option, in many ways. So, after a certain point, the only way is going up, and knowing that, you have to almost complete the climb, is a very, very kind of mental draining, and you need a lot of mental fortitude to overcome that.
Have you done any high building climbs with no equipment? You mentioned climbing cranes.
Yeah. I have a lot of buildering. I think it's called
buildering. But is that something you do? Why do you do that? Is it part of the parkour practice? Is it a personal preference? Is it something that you use to?
It's a good question, really. I mean, I don't think. A lot of people ask me, why, you can jump from this block to this block, same distance. Why do you have to do it, at the top of a roof? When I say lots of people ask me, it's primarily my mom and my mom and my grandmother, just like, why are you doing this? But it's, for me, there comes a point when you want to push that envelope and almost test yourself and see how far you can take things. I mean, I value my life. Yeah, I don't want to die. But if I'm not getting any satisfaction from jumping a block, because the only limitation is the distance. So physically, that's the component in hand. Now, if I take that to a 10-story or 40-story high building, now suddenly the distance is not the only component. I'm also dealing with a death drop, and that plays with you. And in many ways, that adrenaline boost is what kind of drives you in the sport, especially any extreme sport. And you start becoming an adrenaline junkie, and there's that need for facing death and kissing it,
you're necessarily addicted to adrenaline per se. It might be an addiction to, maybe that's also part of it. But I think you become, I think when you experience an adrenaline rush, it's not a pleasant experience. I think it's only after you're done confronting that fear that it feels like euphoria. But during the experience itself, I think the trip is.
I mean, maybe it's wrong to say.
Emotional stress.
Yeah, maybe it's wrong to say that like the adrenaline high is what kind of I enjoy. It's more because obviously, a fight or flight condition. You know, you don't want to be faced with that challenge. I don't want my heart to be racing when I'm doing a jump. I want to be calm. I want to be controlled. I want to know that I can do this. You know, if I can balance across a pole on ground level and do it 1,000 times and not fall, what's any different doing it at the top of the building? You know, if I have so much, there is something different. There's the fear. Now, if you can harness and control that fear to a point where that's the achievement that I enjoy. You know, that for me, that's the final.
You got cut off at a very crucial point. If you could, if you could collect and harness that fear, and then you got cut off, and I was like,
okay, damn it. So if I can, it's harnessing and channeling that fear to the point where you know the ramifications, you know what situation you're in, and being able to overcome it, and that's the sense of achievement that really you feel that real feeling of, you know, achievement and success. Because sure, it's bloody dangerous, but unless you do that, it's almost like that's the real pinnacle of your training. You know, sure, you can balance hours and hours on end on ground level, but can you do it on the top of the building? Can you do it with that extra component involved?
That's why I think it's an extremely useful activity to bring into the life of kids, because it teaches them. This is something I'd be interested in asking you about: teaching children versus teaching adults, because when you teach a child these kinds of things, and they a lot of the times with kids, they find out for themselves. They don't need that much cueing and whatnot. I mean, they need some cueing, of course, but they don't listen a lot of the times. They just go ahead and do their own thing, and they arrive to their own conclusions and to possibly the same result but by their own means, and they carry those lessons with them growing up, whereas an adult has to address a lot of baggage, I think, before they're able to, enjoy such an activity. And I'd like to hear your thoughts on coaching children versus coaching adults.
Well, first and foremost, I find it's kind of ironic that we want them to express themselves as freely as possible, but at the same time, it's a discipline, and we want, obviously, our lesson to be structured, so we can't have this chaos of everyone doing what they want. So in many ways, we want them to be creative, but at selective times. And I think kids struggle with that sometimes, especially the kids that are fond of parkour, because, you can see it from a young age that these kids are maybe going to be the mischievous ones, or the ones that are going to be a little bit more of the thinking outside the box, or just doing something that, and that those are many of the times those are the ones that end up being the really good athletes, because they don't hear other people. They say, like, you got to do a jump, and then someone tells you, like, I don't think you could do that, man. Don't do it. You might get hurt. And they kind of just put their foot down, like, no, I'm not listening to you. I'm going to do it. So in many ways, teaching kids in that aspect can be difficult, and finding that balance and being able to gauge with each individual, and knowing, okay, this one I've got to let him do his own thing, otherwise it's going to be more of a headache. Or maybe some of the other ones, you kind of have to realize that they like structure, they like to be put in a line, they like kind of order. But then at the same time, you kind of see that with adults as well. And it's crazy because a lot of people say like, oh, it must be so different teaching kids with adults, but when it comes to something so improvement, at the end of the day, you know, we all kind of think in the same way.
You got cut off.
There's no.
You got cut off again. Sorry to interrupt your train of thought.
Yeah.
You were saying
When you come.
Yeah. Could you just rewind it? Like,
Yeah. When you compare, like, there's not that much difference when it comes to the movement when you compare kids with adults, because in many ways it's such a primal thing that when you dissect it to a point where it's just moving, I lost my train of thought.
It's fine. It's fine.
Okay.
It's just really. It wouldn't have been coherent had I not. So you had a train of thought and then it cut off and then
Yeah.
Like a good
I don't know. I have no idea. I can't remember what I was talking about.
You were talking about how a lot of people say that it must be so different comparing. It must be so different teaching children compared to teaching adults. But what you have noticed, at least. That may be true in certain respects. I guess teaching mathematics to adults and teaching mathematics to kids, I guess that might have a difference. But with regards to movement and maybe parkour in particular, you specifically have not noticed that there's much of a difference.
So obviously, like as a coach, when I get fancier with the biomechanics and I add a little bit more theory when I'm talking to adults and they want to know a little bit more about kind of why we're doing this and the what and the why. Whereas with kids, it's more kind of like you're tapping into kinesthetic learners and they kind of want like a demonstration more than, you're more than like audible and kind of listeners. But at the end of the day, they're both faced with the same fear, but that doesn't change. And I think that's what's beautiful about parkour, because it's not like it's a self-education. It's a journey that everyone, like, doesn't matter when you start, everyone's going to face that same journey. Whereas, like you said, maybe with something academic, it's different depending on the age that you approach that academia. So yeah. It's, of course, there's many differences on a social level, but I think on a physical level, if you were to kind of see that as just the essence, I think it's so similar. It's so similar. I mean, I've seen fear in adults.
From someone. It's the first time I hear that from someone, and it's kind of refreshing because a lot of the times we hear people saying, "Well, it's so different." It is so different teaching adults from kids. And if you just take the moment,
I used to think that.
What if it's not that different? Maybe. I mean, of course, maybe the baby talk and the being overly animated, like you need to be sometimes with kids. But then again, you
exactly like when I'm faced with different age groups, obviously I have to put on a different like kind of cat, and sometimes I have to word my stuff a little bit different. I'm a little bit more animated, like you said. But at the end of the day, I can do the exact same lesson plan with a 3 to 4 year old that I'll do with and just structure it and tailor it a little bit different, and they'll love it. They'll love both, and that's just because of how I'm delivering it. But the actual structure itself, the backbone is the same. I mean, in many ways, especially like a sport like parkour, I find teaching kids can be a lot easier than teaching adults, because they're a lot more moldable, and they haven't been like cemented either socially they haven't been indoctrinated in a certain way to believe certain norms, or they haven't been kind of wired to think that they can't do this. You kind of have this fresh canvas and you're like, do this, and they don't turn around and say like no, because they have a lot of trust in you. I find like kids have way more trust in you as a coach, which is again a lot of responsibility, but way more trust in you as a coach than adults have, because they're also kind of judging you in a way. Maybe not personally, but they're looking, they're protecting themselves. They're also a little bit
cautious. They're adults, growing up. It's a painful experience. People screw you over.
Exactly.
Like,
Yeah. 100%. So you're a little bit okay, yeah, I know he's saying me that I can do this, but does he really know me? Whereas a kid, they just don't have that fear, and they almost just go like straight onto things. And I find that so refreshing, even for me. I see these kids just kind of, I sometimes think that I'm gonna like talk, and then sometimes less is more with kids, because you just tell them to do something and they'll just do it. And sometimes when you like break down the progressions for something, you start scaring them. You're like, okay, we're gonna do this and this and this, and they're like, what? Can I just jump here? Yeah, you could just jump here, and then they do that, and that's fine. Whereas sometimes adults, they want a little bit more of like the breakdown, and it takes longer.
Because now you're kind of contradicting what you said earlier, in the sense that adults and kids, you kind of treat them more or less. They're more or less the same in terms of learning, and now you make some good point. So I guess with certain respects they are the same. In other respects,
no. I mean, obviously, one's an adult, one's a kid, and I mean it more in the, if you kind of take a scope out, I think that they're very similar in the aspect of the movement itself, and how they see parkour. Now, when you delve into how their ways of learning are, then I think they're different. Like I said, kids are a little bit more of kind of just seers. They see you and they do a lot more of kind of mirror memory. They mimic what you do, monkey see, monkey do kind of thing. Whereas adults, I think they like to hear, not all, but they like to kind of hear how that's done, why we do that. So like when you're teaching a parkour roll, for example, they like to know why we're doing a parkour roll. Like, how does this help me? How does this? Whereas a kid's not going to, so when do I do this parkour roll? They just want to do it. They see it, it looks cool, and they do it. And they keep doing it.
The best way to learn, in my opinion, the best way to learn is just try.
Yeah.
Because even if you understand it logically,
yeah,
I mean, you could do it. You need to understand it
exactly.
physically. And you really, and this has been a lesson for me, at least in jiu-jitsu. I was always trying to understand it logically, and I just gave up on that completely. I was like, I go to the class sometimes, I watch what the professor's doing, and if it's unfamiliar, I try to understand, but in the back of my head, I know. I'm like,
yeah,
I'm looking at this person from this third person perspective. I'm looking at them. Whereas when I'm performing a task, I'm looking at my environment through my eyes, and I have to interact. I'm looking at this. I'm looking at myself, which is not the same. And I just decided I'm not going to stress about that. I'm not going to stress about memorizing. What I'm going to stress about is making sure that I try it as many times as I can within the specified time frame, and hopefully within that time frame I'll be able to make a shit ton of mistakes, because if I make those mistakes, I think
you'll improve.
That's where the learning happens.
Yeah, 100%. And in many ways we try to encourage failure a lot, in a safe environment, which leads us to, again, why are we, the training grounds that we're using and the pros and cons for training grounds like that. But I think that, sometimes when you're so sure that a student can jump there, you shouldn't put a blue mat or, a safety mat underneath them, because now you're almost like where that kid would normally just go and do it, you're putting a thing now that they're kind of becoming complacent and they're relying on this mat. So now if you go to step it up, they'll be like, where's the blue mat? Or and I find that really interesting because when I first started parkour, we learned in a very urban and raw environment, you know, like I said, we were at building sites with nails everywhere, and it was not safe at all. But that also kind of built a lot of that mental fortitude. We weren't in a safe environment. And I find a lot of times now people are learning in like parkour in like gymnastic gym, you know, like gymnasiums, or like with mats and padding and foam pits and stuff like that. And then they go outdoor and they're faced with the real world, where there isn't these like symmetrical walls or like bars that they can cling onto. And they've got these really shit little ledges that are like dusty and stuff like that. And it's like, yeah, this is the real deal.
It reminds me of going bouldering in an indoor gym and then going bouldering outdoors.
Yeah.
It reminds me of, you know, rolling at the end of a jiu-jitsu session and then actually going to a competition. You know, there's, which is interesting because I was just thinking, parkour, yeah, as long as you supplement your training with the real thing, unless you do that, your practice is incomplete. Your practice is
100%, man, 100%. And you were asking me earlier on, you know, how does that affect your training? You know, if you're teaching in a training ground, and it does, and that's why we're trying to incorporate a lot of outdoor classes now in our schedule.
Okay.
So, which is quite difficult due to a couple of reasons. One being the heat. Second reason, we can only have males for now.
But they've granted you access to areas where you could do this.
Yes, some compounds, and some places that are kind of near our gym that aren't that densely populated, in close proximity to our gym, which we feel comfortable. We've kind of scouted out the areas and think that it'd be okay and suitable for a training session there. And it's amazing to see how some of the kids that we've been having for over a year now, and like good students, you know, like some of them like are real prodigies who are amazing in our studio. They've pretty much like hit every challenge that we've given them now. We're like every lesson now we're kind of having to think like, what can we do now to challenge this person? Now, when we take them outdoors, it's a whole new experience for them. And you just see that like fear kind of coming back, and it's almost like overwhelming because they're in this foreign environment, and now they have to almost apply all these skills that they've learned in an environment they have no clue what is. And it's interesting to see how, you know, it's almost like seeing an animal having to acclimate in a new environment. You know, it's like having to almost adapt to this new foreign alienated place. So I find like incredible, because I was really kind of looking at them and how they were treating each challenge in the outdoor session, and they were so different. I mean, if you were to see footage of them indoors and then see what they were attempting outdoors, you would be like, "What? This was before, right?" I was like, "No, this was a few days after."
It's also probably the reason why athletes, before a competition, they travel to the country, they travel to the city, they travel to the studio or the space where the performance will take place, so that they don't have to go through that. At least go through that, but to a lesser degree. You know, go through the stressor of having to adapt to a new environment, because it is a stressor. It's a lot of novelty. It's just everything is new. You have to kind of create a map.
A lot to take in. Yeah, and likewise, if we were to take them back to the same spot, they would, you know, already you'd see a massive improvement, this boost of kind of confidence. It's like, yeah, I know the grip of the walls now. I've kind of know the distances. I know the surface I'm landing on. So already, you know, you have this confidence. And what's changed? You know, nothing's changed physically. They're the same person. They know the same skills. They weren't injured. It was all mental. It was their own brain just kind of going like, whoa, this is new.
Yeah, it's tasting the environment.
Yeah. So you're quite right by saying it's that finding that balance, you know, like I always think that a training garden parkour should just be a medium to improve and condition yourself for the outdoor, because parkour is an outdoor sport, and it should never be the other way around. It should never be like, oh, I'll do some training, then I'll do a little bit of outdoor. It's like at the end of the day, it's the training is just to be conditioning in a safe environment and learning new moves. But then all of those things should be applied in an outdoor environment.
I can totally see how people would lose track of that, though, lose sight of that.
Yeah.
Because, you know, it's fun working in a safe environment. And
Yeah.
you could progress a lot faster, at least in terms of skill acquisition. But
Yeah.
the mental game and the internal game that comes with
Yeah.
training in the real environment for which the discipline was intended for.
Exactly, which is ironic because it's all about getting out of your comfort zone. But then people will find, being habitual creatures, will find our comfort in a training ground.
Yeah,
you know,
because you could still push yourself out of your comfort zone while staying inside a different one. You know, it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, I could practice, I don't know, like a very sketchy flip from a height, but inside a gym, and it's still kind of sketchy and dodgy, and I'm afraid I'm gonna get hurt maybe, but it's still inside the gym. You would have never even considered doing that flip outdoors.
Exactly. Oh, very true. 100%, man.
Keeps you real, you know, that it keeps you humble, I guess.
It's grounding. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like people that think they're the shit inside the gym. I'm guilty of that sometimes.
I think we've all fallen prey to that, you know. Like there's a lot of moves that maybe I've done in the gym I work out, and then I think I can just kind of take it outdoors, and then I'm like, wait, where's the mat? I want to do one, and then I'll take it off, and there's no fucking mat. So, you know, like this is the thing, and which goes back to why I like teaching the kids in a raw way if I can, because you don't have that access all the time. You know, if you go to train outdoors, you haven't got access to that mat. You've got to overcome that challenge mentally more so than physically, without knowing that you've got this safety net that's going to get you.
100%. Man, I think you're doing incredible work over in Saudi. Like this is just.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, it is.
I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Like it reminds me of what a lot was done in Abu Dhabi, but the difference is there's a big difference. The difference is that jiu-jitsu takes place indoors. Jiu-jitsu takes place on mats. Jiu-jitsu takes place in a closed and rather safe environment. Parkour is an outdoor sport that takes place in the concrete jungle, and it's just different. It's different. I think it's a hard thing to make it to get a society such as the one in Saudi to fully embrace this culture, especially since they don't even embrace this culture in Europe fully, you know, in the US fully, in Australia, they don't. It's still a counterculture. So to have sort of like a counterculture like that in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is remarkable. Quick question: how did you end up working there? Did you apply, or did somebody reach out to you?
So I was actually in the midst of doing my master's. I was going to do a master's in Loughborough University, and then basically my friend who I'm living with now, Lewis, he was set to come here. He reached out to Dubai and he was asking if there's any positions there, and they said no, but there is this gym that's going to be opening in Jeddah. It's going to be the first parkour gym. I'll link you up with the owner who's going to open it, and then you can see from there. So I think he applied, and they met up, and they were kind of all set, and he was on board there, and they will only need one coach at the time.
Awesome. Yeah, you got cut off for a second.
Did I get? Okay. So once they only wanted one coach at the time because they were still obviously starting up, and then they realized that they were going to have 2 studios, so one for parkour, one for gymnastics and movement. And then he basically they asked him, do you have any people in mind? Do you know any people? And he was like, yeah, I do. And then he basically told me, sent me an email like this and that. There's this job offer. What do you think? Which was kind of like, I was kind of like on a tightrope there, because I was, like I said, in the midst of doing my master's, and I wasn't kind of sure.
I was gonna ask, because it sounds like
Yeah,
you had to choose between 2 very important
and very different.
paths.
Yeah, exactly. And I almost kind of foresaw that. I was like, this is a big decision here. Like, this is something that will, maybe, dictate and direct the rest of my life, the butterfly effect of that. So it was interesting to kind of, I kind of weighed it out, and I said, I can't miss this opportunity. And here I am.
How'd your family deal with that initially?
They were a little, yeah, true. They were a little bit reluctant at first. They didn't kind of like the idea, and I think a lot of it is just to do with the sheer amount of propaganda and shit you hear on the news about Middle East. And then, I was hearing so much stuff prior to coming here. Like, oh, you got to be careful and this and that, and I was just like, you know what? I'm gonna go and I'm gonna create my own opinion of the place. I'm not gonna leave media or the news fuel my opinion or feed me this shit. I'm gonna go, and I found that like any place in the world, there's bad eggs and there's good eggs, and you're still on planet Earth. It's the same shit.
One of the lessons I got from traveling is, as long as you respect the other, the traditions and the culture.
The religion.
Well, yeah, if you respect the way people do things inside the culture, the new culture you're living in, you'll be fine. But don't come in thinking it has to be like back home or like this place or like that. Every place is different. And you're not here to change how things are done, even though you kind of are.
Exactly, which I was actually gonna interject there, because that was what I was a little bit worried about, because at the same time I was like, I'm not gonna impose, and I'm gonna be very docile, and I want to be quite incognito in my time there. But at the same time, we're teaching parkour, we're getting news channels, coming and interested in what we're doing. CNN came the other day to kind of ask about parkour, and it's getting a lot of exposure for us in a good way, because that's creating more traffic and thing to our gym. But at the same time, if someone doesn't like us and doesn't like what we're doing, they could easily shut us down. But I don't think, inshallah, I think times are changing now, and I think that they're realizing there's a global shift, and they can't suppress this anymore.
It's also kind of cool though, that you are in that environment, that you have to be careful and you have to be diplomatic and you have to be. It's almost as if you need to tread lightly. It's like you're walking along a minefield, which makes you think. It makes you really think about, is this the right next move? Is it not? Instead of just taking everything for granted, like would be the case in a lot of countries in Europe or the US or.
100%. Yeah, 100%. Definitely, man. I think in many ways, you're right. It's a lot about treading lightly, and I think also the fact that we're trying to spread this. There's a lot of responsibility on us on how do we spread it in a sensible manner without, disrespecting either the sport or disrespecting the country, or not. We're almost being given a mantle, and it's like, here, spread this. And it's like, shit, I wasn't ready for this, you know, like, am I spreading, you know, there's a lot of times when you kind of think, you know, am I doing this correctly? Am I doing the right thing here? You know, it's, yeah, but it's a journey. I'm loving it nonetheless. I think everyone's mindset is quite different when approaching any sport, especially at first. And, you know, you're kind of set that, you know, it's going to be just butterflies and rainbows, and it's not. There's going to be struggle, there's going to be frustration, there's going to be injuries, and there's going to be times when you can even come to a point where you're resenting your sport. And I don't mean that in like, because if you just resent it, you'd stop it. I mean that there'd be times when maybe you had an injury, and because of that, you can't do what you love, or you can't just function as a human being because of an injury that you have. And then you start to be grateful for little things, which has kind of taught me a lot to respect my body, take up a lot of stretching and giving back to my body, because I'm asking so much from my body when I'm doing parkour. It's a very explosive sport. It's very impactful. And then I think that, you know, when I'm asking my body like it's like a machine, I have to give it some maintenance. I have to give it some tender loving care back. Yeah, some TLC. So, and I think that comes with maturity. I think that comes with age. When you waking up and fuck. So with time, I think I've kind of learned to. It's a science, you know. You learn your body a little bit more. You learn what your body likes, what it doesn't like, and I think there's no blueprint. I remember when I was doing my rehabilitation, I was following a program, and I was following like maybe 10 exercises a day, and eight out of 10 of them were perfect. I loved them. My body was taking it in, it was like it. But then I remember 2 of them, and maybe I wasn't doing them correctly, or like maybe I wasn't doing them exactly the way I should be, but I thought I was doing them quite right. It was irritating my body. I didn't like it. And not because the program is saying do it, you should do it. I think you find that your body acts differently to different things. So yeah, my advice would be, if you really want to do what you love for a while, give time for your body to recover, give it some love. If you want it to do stuff for you, you've got to do stuff back for it. It shouldn't be just a take. You should give back to your body.
And that there is no blueprint.
There is no blueprint.
Everybody's different. You need to find your own blueprint.
Exactly.
That was something that stood out. It's like, yeah, we like seeing people doing certain skills, and we want to learn from them, and then they give us their training program or what they think we need to do. But at the end of the day, they're not responsible for your body. You're responsible for your own body, and you know your own body better than
other people. Exactly. And you might have, you know, maybe your body's just telling you, don't work out today, or don't even stretch, you know. There's times when like you could even thinking about giving back to your body, it could be too much, you know. Just do nothing. That maybe your body just wants to absolutely do nothing. Do it. Listen to your body, and then I'm sure you'll have a greater longevity to your sport or your passion.
And with regards to people that are considering pursuing this as a means of earning a living,
don't do it. No. Go into corporate banking. No.
Well, that's the thing. It depends on people's.
I think, look, personally, I think it's how much you love it. And I know it's not a very, not a really concrete answer, but I mean it in the sense that when I was younger, I thought like, all I want to do is parkour. All I want to do is parkour. But, you know, as you get older and you kind of see other things in life, and life isn't just parkour. You know, I wanted to go and study. I genuinely did, you know, and I wanted to kind of do other things. but what was it that kind of brought me back was, yeah, I had this underlining fire, or I really wanted to pursue that. However, there are times when, you know, and this goes back to the very beginning of our discussion, where when there is that imbalance on the spectrum between your coaching and your practicing the sport. Because most people who want to earn a living with parkour, most people will have to be coaches. Unless you're some incredible athlete, which is quite rare, then you're probably going to have to go into coaching, and then maybe you can own a business in the future. But you'll probably start off as a coaching of that prowess. And I find that if you don't find that balance, then you might begin to resent the coaching, because that's what initially got you there, and that's why you want to pursue that passion. Okay, if I go in, that means that I can continue progressing and improving as an athlete. Sometimes, though, that's not always the case. I feel that maybe if some days, if I had an office job, I think I'd have more energy to go and do parkour at the end of the day than if I've been teaching for 4 hours straight. The last thing I want to do is start doing flips, you know? So again, finding that balance, I think, is the hard thing. But if you really love something and you're passionate about it, you will succeed in it, and in success, you will make money.